The smell of old money and older secrets clung to the library of the Ashworth estate. It was in the air, woven into the Persian rug, and pooled on the floor beneath the body of Arthur Ashworth. Detective Miles Kaido stood in the doorway, his sharp eyes taking in the scene. Arthur Ashworth, 72, scion of one of the city's most established families, was slumped over his mahogany desk, a single, precise gunshot wound to his temple. A vintage Webley revolver lay near his right hand, its cold, blued steel a stark contrast to the warm, polished wood. Suicide. Open and shut, Officer Miller said, snapping his notebook shut. The old man's fortune was circling the drain. He finally faced the music. Kaido didn't move. He'd been a homicide detective for 15 years, and the air in this room felt wrong. It wasn't grief or shock, it was a stage set with meticulous care. He stepped closer, his gaze cataloging the inconsistencies. The left side of Arthur's face was bruised, a faint, purpling swelling around the cheekbone, an injury hours old, not sustained in a fall. His left hand, resting on the desk, had faint traces of soil under the nails. The right hand, the one near the gun, was impeccably clean. And then there was the book. A single, leather-bound volume lay open on the desk beside the body. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. A heavy, silver letter opener marked a page. Kaido leaned in, careful not to touch. The left page was pristine. The right page, however, had a single, smudged fingerprint marring the margin. A desperate, sliding print, as if a blood-slicked finger had brushed against it. But there was no blood on the book. None at all. Miller, Kaido said, his voice quiet but firm. Tell the medical examiner this is now a homicide scene. And get me a list of everyone who was in this house tonight. The open and shut case had just been blown wide open. The list of inhabitants was short, but heavy with motive. There was Eleanor, Arthur's much younger, and now very wealthy, widow, her grief seeming as carefully applied as her makeup. There was David, Arthur's ambitious and perpetually resentful nephew, who stood to inherit a controlling stake in the failing family business. And there was Lena, the quiet, observant live-in nurse who had cared for Arthur in his final years. Over the next 2 days, Kaido pieced together a portrait of a man cornered. Arthur Ashworth's empire, built on manufacturing, was crumbling. He was weeks from bankruptcy and a very public disgrace. A powerful motive for suicide, but the evidence in the library screamed otherwise. The forensics report confirmed his suspicions. The gun had been wiped clean. The soil under Arthur's nails was a specific blend of peat and perlite, matching the potting soil in the estate's greenhouse, not found in the main gardens. The bruise on his face was consistent with a blow from a blunt object, delivered at least 2 hours before death. The fingerprint on the book belonged to David Ashworth. Confronted in the opulent drawing room, David was a cocktail of nervous energy and arrogance. So I touched his book, he snapped. I was in there this afternoon, arguing with him. The old fool was going to sell the company, throw away our legacy. I slammed the book shut when I left. I must have left the print then. And the bruise on his face? Kaido asked calmly. David paled. I shoved him. He fell against the desk. I didn't shoot him. I loved the company, not him, but I'm not a killer. The alibis were shaky. Eleanor claimed she was in her studio painting all evening, but a half-finished canvas showed paint that was still tacky, too fresh for her timeline. Lena, the nurse, said she was in her room reading, but a copy of the same edition of Meditations was found on her nightstand. When Kaido asked her about it, her calm demeanor fractured for a single, telling second. It was Mr. Ashworth's favorite, she said, her voice tight. He often read passages to me. He was a complex man. That night, Kaido sat in his car down the street from the Ashworth estate, the case file glowing on his passenger seat. He was missing something. A connection. The gun, the book, the soil, the bruise. They were pieces from different puzzles. His phone buzzed. It was the forensics lab. Detective, we pulled a partial from the silver letter opener in the book. It's too smudged for a positive ID, but it's not Arthur's, David's, or any of the staff we printed. And one more thing, the page it was marking. Chapter 9. It's a passage about enduring injustice and the strength found in silence. Kaito's blood ran cold. The letter opener wasn't a bookmark. It was a message. He looked up at the darkened estate. One of the windows on the second floor, Lena's room, flickered with a faint, shifting light. A candle. As he watched, the flame was abruptly extinguished, plunging the room into blackness. The house wasn't sleeping. It was watching. The following morning, Kaito returned to the estate with a warrant and a new theory. He didn't head for the library. Instead, he made his way to the greenhouse, a humid, glass-paneled structure filled with the earthy scent of vegetation and decay. He found Lena there, tending to a row of orchids with a surgeon's precision. He loved it in here, she said without turning around, as if she'd been expecting him. Said it was the only place things still made sense. That you could put in the work and see something beautiful grow. Unlike his business, Kaito said, stopping a few feet away. Unlike his life, she corrected softly. She finally turned, her eyes clear and direct. You know, don't you? I know Arthur Ashworth didn't kill himself. I know he was struck in the study, likely knocked unconscious. I know someone then took him to the greenhouse, getting soil under his nails as he was dragged or as he struggled. Then, they brought him back to the study, staged the suicide, and fired the gun. Lena said nothing, her silence a confirmation. The bruise, the soil, the wiped gun, it was all too perfect, too staged. But the killer made one mistake. They used the letter opener to mark a specific page in Meditations. A page about enduring injustice. A message from the victim, not the killer. Kaito took a step closer. Arthur marked that page after you hit him, but before you shot him, didn't he? He was conscious for a moment. He knew what was happening. He knew you, of all people, would understand the reference. He was telling anyone who cared to look that his silence was a choice, that he was enduring one final, ultimate injustice. From someone he trusted. Lena's composure broke. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. He was going to fire me. After everything. After I cared for him, protected his secrets, loved him when his own family saw him as a wallet. He found out about the money. What money, Lena? The small amounts I'd been siphoning from his personal accounts. For my son. His medical bills. She looked at her hands, the hands that had comforted and then killed. He called me a parasite. Said he'd see me in prison. I picked up the statue. I didn't mean to, but when he fell, I saw my whole life crumbling. The gun was in the desk drawer. He kept it there, a symbol of a power he no longer had. The pieces clicked into place. The argument with David provided the perfect cover for the earlier bruise. Her knowledge of his routine and his love for the book gave her the means to plant a subtle, desperate clue, believing it would point to the family. She had orchestrated a tragedy, casting others as the villains. He woke up as I was positioning him at the desk, she whispered, her voice hollow. He looked at the book, then at me. He didn't scream. He just moved the letter opener. And he smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. The confession hung in the humid air, surrounded by the vibrant, living orchids. Kaito read Lena her rights as the cuffs clicked shut around her wrists, the sound final and metallic in the quiet, growing space. Weeks later, the case was closed. Lena's full confession, coupled with the forensic evidence, made for a solid conviction. The Ashworth fortune, what was left of it, was entangled in lawsuits between Eleanor and David. The grand estate was put up for sale, its secrets destined to be buried under new paint and new owners. Detective Kaito sat at his desk, the Ashworth file a neat, closed stack in his out tray. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an autopsy, a necessary dissection that revealed a rotten core, but offered no cure. He kept thinking about Arthur Ashworth's final act. It wasn't a scream of defiance, but a whisper of profound, tragic insight. In his last moments, cornered and betrayed, he hadn't tried to fight or plead. He had chosen to communicate the truth in the only language he had left, the Stoic philosophy he admired. He had accepted his fate and, with a flick of a silver blade, ensured his killer would be known. He had used his own murder as the ultimate checkmate. And Lena? She was a villain, yes, but one sculpted by desperation. She had seen a kind, weak man and had exploited him. When he finally showed a spine, it was to destroy her, and in her panic, she had destroyed them both. The whole case was a Russian nesting doll of betrayal. Kaito walked to the window of his precinct office, looking out at the city sparkling in the night. It was a landscape of a million stories, most of them mundane, some of them monstrous. The Ashworth case was a reminder that the most dangerous crimes weren't committed in dark alleys by strangers. They were born in drawing rooms and greenhouses, between people who knew each other's secrets and weaknesses. They were crimes of passion, of greed, of desperation, all the old, human failings dressed up in new clothes. The mystery wasn't really about who held the gun. It was about the invisible threads that led them to pull the trigger. The silent agreements, the unspoken resentments, the small betrayals that piled up until they formed a cliff from which there was no stepping back. He turned from the window, the image of the open book on the mahogany desk etched in his mind. A man's legacy, reduced to a single, silent clue in the margin of a text about enduring pain. For Kaito, the case would forever be a lesson in listening to the quietest voices at a crime scene, the whisper of a page, the sigh of the soil, the deafening silence of a final, calculated breath. The truth wasn't always in the blood. Sometimes, it was in the clean spot right next to it.